that. So who's got a bank account? Pretty much everybody, right? We all have bank accounts. We know how they work. We earn some money, we make a deposit, and then we can write checks or use our ATM card, right? To draw money down off of those accounts. And we can buy things, we can pay our bills, we can share with our friends, right? Have you ever been a little short paying your bills, maybe?
No.
Never. Run out of money before the month ended, maybe? Overdrawn an account, perhaps? The banks charge so much for that kind of mistake these days, don't they? It's crazy. Yeah. So money management is something that we learn over time. We learn how to earn and budget and make our deposits and spend our cash and make sure things all balance out in the long run. We kind of learn that over time. And it seems like that when our money is flowing and kind of in alignment, that all of our life is flowing and in alignment. And when it's not, it can be a stressful time. It can create strain, it can even create struggle in our lives, particularly if there's some emergency or some crisis that comes up and we don't have the necessary financial reserves to meet that crisis that's popped up in our life. That can be a very stressful time for us. And our founder of Centers for Spiritual Living and the author of The Science of Mind, Dr. Ernest Holmes, he suggests that crisis, emergency, that all of those are times when we need more love, more tolerance, more kindness and understanding, and a deeper faith and a higher hope. And if we think about those times of crisis and emergency in our life, there's a spiritual component, isn't there? About how we're responding to that crisis, how we're responding to that emergency. We can draw on our spiritual reserves, right? So today we're going to look at what is this idea of a spiritual bank account. A spiritual bank account. And the ways that we can manage it. We can build our reserves and the resources necessary to have those accounts in place, to have that abundant balance, if you will, of spiritual capital upon which we can draw in those times of need in our life. Or just in the day-to-day, right? Driving to work, we can need some spiritual capital sometimes, right? Sure. So in this month we are looking at our new series, which is Empower Your Life by Living the Science of Mind. And we've been talking all year about this book called Living the Science of Mind. We're using it for our readings and our quotes and many of our talks and things. And this month I'm pulling out some of the specific essays that Dr. Holmes wrote. Now these were written later on in his life. They were written probably in the late 40s, early 50s. And included in his correspondence course called Home Study Course in Science of Mind. Anybody remember correspondence courses where you would mail you get the lesson, you'd do all the work, you'd mail it back into them, they'd grade it and send you the new one? Well, he had one of those, and it was 48 weeks long. And it was all about the study of the science of mind. And we Centers for Spiritual Living have taken those and published them, and there are a stack of books about this big now. But included in those, not only does he have his talks and everything, but he has references to the Science of Mind textbook, the big book, and he has these essays to expound and give us the practical application, if you will, of this teaching of the science of mind. So that's what we're exploring this year. And this month, today my talk is managing your spiritual bank account. How we manage this thing. So everything that I was saying about your financial account is pretty much true in your spiritual account, right? It's pretty much true there. Holmes suggests that we all have to just accept our spiritual bank account. That we have to accept it. And unlike a financial account, this holds, again, our spiritual capital, things like love, things like faith, things like peace, harmony, joy. Those are the spiritual capital, the spiritual coin, if you will, that are in our spiritual bank accounts. So how do we open one? How do we accept this? How do we make deposits in it? And how do we know that our deposits are safe? And that we're going to be there when we need to draw on them. How do we know that? Well, Ernest Holmes tells us that just like our financial accounts, we have to earn the substance and supply of our spiritual accounts. What? Now that one shocked me when I read that. It's like, wait a minute, that sounds like separation. What is he talking about? But continuing on, what he's talking about is that we earn our spiritual coin, if you will, by being love, by practicing love. And he talks about this bank account and that the initial deposit is already made by Spirit. And it's the gift of life. And we've talked how God is love. And if God is love and we all have that spark of the divine within us, we are all filled with that love already. Yes? We all have that initial deposit of love, of unconditional love that is God within us. So we have that. And we earn this supply by continuing to practice that love and being that love. He suggests that it's life itself. So as I look around the room, and we're all here. We're all alive. We're all living. Do you know what the odds are of us all being here? I mean, think about that. If you think back to all the way back to conception, through birth, through childhood adventures, and I know some of your stories, and you're all very lucky to be here, right? And now through life, and here we are, alive and well, and in this room together in this moment in Scottsdale, Arizona. I mean, what are the odds of this particular group being right here today through all the experiences that we've had? It's astronomical when we start thinking about it. So this thing called life that lives within us is absolutely amazing that we have here to experience and to be together and to play together, as it were. So we've received that initial deposit. We're here. But just like a financial account, we do have to have our maintaining of our spiritual account. We have to have our maintaining of that by being loving, which includes kindness and generosity. But have you really accepted, as Holmes encourages us and tells us, that the base of everything, the foundation of everything is love? Have you really accepted that? I mean, I know it can be challenging, right? That we have all these bumps and bruises through life, for all the experiences that we have and the things that happen to us, and it can be easy to become cynical and skeptical about love being the base of everything. Sure, it's easy in our families, with our pets perhaps, with our spouses, with our friends, with people that agree with us. That's all easy stuff. But what about everybody else? What about this idea of all? What about this idea of everything, and that spiritual idea of love is the foundation of all that is within each and every one of us? Are we there? Are we over in cynical and skeptical? Or are we over in our chart on complete and total belief? Or are we somewhere in the middle? In the yeah, but not there. Yeah, I get it over here. I'm in full 100% belief over here, but not there. Not there. Yeah, but. We all have them, don't we? Because sometimes it can feel difficult to love all and to think all is included in that. So where are your yeah buts? Where are your them, those, they, and not we? Not we. Where do we fall on that scale? Who's outside of your circle of love? Who's outside of that? Remember the movie Meet the Fockers? I didn't mess that up. Remember that, where De Niro kept saying, we've got the circle of trust, you're inside the circle of trust. Remember all that? Well, who's outside of your circle of love? Who's outside of your circle of love? Holmes tells us that love is within us. Love is within us. It cannot be destroyed. It can be ignored. It can be ignored. He says, to the extent that we abandon love, we will feel that love has abandoned us. Share a story about my dear beloved father. My father had a tendency to push away very strongly his siblings on occasion. And then he would be very angry because they didn't love him anymore, because he felt like he was abandoned by them. But in fact, what had happened? He had abandoned them, and they responded accordingly, right? That mirror effect that goes on in our lives. And how many times do we get caught in that, where we push something away and then we're mad because it's abandoned us? Well, and that's what he's suggesting here, is that to the extent that we abandon love, we feel abandoned by love, because we must first be that which we seek. He goes on to say that denying love is our only problem and embracing it is our only answer. Embracing love is our only answer. So the way to earn the spiritual coin is to be love in all things. And I'm not talking about lovey-dovey, have lunch with everybody kind of love. I'm talking about that higher conscious awareness of love as God, love as spirit, love as the highest consciousness that there possibly is. And that interconnectivity of all of life, the oneness and the wholeness. Remember our example of the aspen trees and how they all look different, but they're all connected in the same root system? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That root system of love is what I'm talking about. So I want to go back to what we talked about last month. Remember the question, what would love do? What would love do here? It's like Craig's saying, if Jesus and Buddha came back, what would they say? What would they do? And the same here, what would love do? I think we have a very powerful opportunity in front of us right now to practice this. I, like many of you, saw what happened on Thursday. I heard the news reports. I witnessed on social media the explosion of comments and so forth that went on with this question of the new health care bill, the national health care bill, versus the one that we currently have. And as I read those headlines and things, I realized there might be some overdrafts in some spiritual bank accounts this weekend. Yeah, so I thought maybe I'd do a little research, because I don't dig into politics a lot. I follow it, and I do kind of follow the headlines. But I know that headlines are what? Generated to sell ads. Yeah, so what's really going on? So I sometimes will go to the BBC, because a third party looking at us kind of sees us a little more clearly sometimes than our own internal media can see us sometimes. And I found an interesting report there, comparing and contrasting the two. The existing national health with the new national health. And the interesting thing was, some things stay the same. Did you know that? Some things change. Some things get better, some things not so much. So it's change, it's evolving, it's evolution. But what touched me in this whole scenario, and with what I saw being launched, if you will, towards the east, was, wow, what if we imagined all of that as that anger and frustration as these little green spitwads of nastiness? And that's what was being launched there. And all of this ends up as Swiss cheese with holes and things in it, as opposed to this open, dynamic platform of creativity, for a place for God to show up and create and be and bring this win-win. Don't know what we teach? We teach win-win. What if we were supporting a win-win, the divinity of God and the wholeness of the one through whatever this plan is, that it's just going to be better. It's just going to be better. Can we put our energy, what we focus on expands, can we put our energy on that and illuminate this process with the creativity of the divine, knowing that Spirit shines its light alike on all, makes its rain to fall down alike on all? We talk about that concept of all around here. We talk about creating a world that works for all. All means nothing outside. It is the conservatives, it is the liberals, it's the moderates, it's everybody in between and on the fringes. It's those that are disenfranchised, and it's the billionaires and the corporations. All, right? So how do we, I don't know how to do it. Spirit does. Spirit does. And my support is of that creative process of Spirit. So when I ask, what would love do here? Love would be love. Love would support the creativity. I don't know what it is, not my job. My job is to simply be love and allow that light to shine. Allow that light of creativity to shine on this process and to know the perfect and correct and right unfoldment for all in the process. So these are areas and ways that we can walk our talk and understand this concept of spiritual love. The concept of spiritual love. Reading beyond the headlines. Recognizing that, as Shakespeare said, our perspective is what makes it so. Our perspective is what makes it so. So how can we go about shifting our perspective and keeping our spiritual bank accounts filled? Because the stuff that I witnessed on Thursday and Friday was draining some accounts. Those accounts need to be refilled. So how do we go about refilling those accounts? Have you ever felt emotionally, spiritually, or physically even depleted, empty? I call that my empty bucket. You know, they can't pour anything out of an empty bucket, right? So we've got to refill that. I think about care providers, people that give so much of themselves and their heart to the patients and the ones that they're caring for and providing for. They sometimes give themselves away completely, and they feel emptiness. And they have to, through self-care, take care of themselves and refill, so to speak, their emotional bucket. Refill their bucket. And that's what we're talking about here, is refilling our spiritual bank account. We can't pour out anything. We can't draw down upon an empty bank account. Holmes tells us that in order to earn our spiritual coin, that we have to spend time alone. And I love his phraseology. He says, straightening out all the little animosities that we might have. Straightening out our little animosities that we might have, and resolving those into one great love, which is God. Connecting with the divine within us all. Understanding and realizing and practicing that God is all that there is. I remember I listened to Reverend Sherry last week. I listened to her talk, and I loved her quote from Hafiz about drop the knife. But then holding the knife and being in unforgiveness, that we're holding that knife. And the same applies here too. To straighten out the animosities, drop the knife. Be at peace. And it starts with me. It starts with the I am within each of us. To straighten out our own individual animosities within ourselves, and then allow that to spread forth and influence and affect those around us. So other deposits that we might make in the spiritual bank account. How about faith? How about faith? Not being shaken up by our circumstances. I think of faith like I think of our first responders, the police and fire and medical personnel that show up in cases of physical emergencies. They have massive amounts of training, don't they, before they ever are allowed out in the field, so to speak, so that they're prepared to step into those circumstances and situations and not be shaken up by them, to be able to be of service to the people that are in need at that time. So our faith, building our faith, is our training, is our practice of being able to be that first responder to ourselves and not be shaken up by our circumstances, to be able to stand within them and still know and hold the truth. Still know and hold the truth. And that's what our spiritual practices do for us. They help us to weather those ups and downs and help make the crooked road straight, so to speak. Our spiritual practices keep us filled up, spending time in the silence. Other deposits that we make include joy and happiness. Imagine if you were just so filled up and had such a full account of joy and happiness that it just bubbled up whenever you needed it. Just bubbled up within you, that joy that just overflows whenever you need it. And just writing that check of joy and happiness. Anybody ever made a bonus or a big commission or something, or just received a little windfall of some extra cash, and maybe you go out and have lunch with friends and you pick up the tab and say, I'll buy that. Your pockets are full, right? Your pockets feel full. You feel generous of heart. That's what happens when we can keep our spiritual bank account full. We can share that joy and that happiness with others around us who may be in need of a smile, a kind word, some sort of a kindness. We have full pockets of joy and of happiness that we can share. And of course, let's not forget peace. That peace that is that peace of God that passes all understanding, as we've heard. It is just such an amazing peace that we can walk through the world with. Imagine going up to your ATM and putting your card in and just having an avalanche of peace come down upon you, that you can then walk through the world as peace. I think that's what Mother Teresa and perhaps even Gandhi had. They had full bank accounts, didn't they? Yeah, they had full bank accounts. So the secret to a full spiritual bank account is being centered and practicing the presence of God. Centering ourselves in the presence of God, knowing the source of our very being, knowing that we are guided and guarded by that source at all times, having that connection with the beloved, that we know we can tap on that account at any time that we need it, anytime that we need it. We're never alone. So I want to move to our practicing the principles, and we'll leave the slide up at the end for you. Our first one is to accept that inheritance. We're in partnership with the divine. We are in partnership with the divine. Accept the inheritance that is already awaiting us. Say yes. Imagine if you received an inheritance from some relative that you weren't aware of. You'd have to accept it, right? This relative you're aware of. This is spirit. And your account is waiting for you. Say yes and receive it. Say yes and receive it. Number 2, fill up your bucket. Fill up your bucket. Practice the presence. Commit to a spiritual practice that serves you. A way to connect. Every day we have things coming at us, don't we? The news, the headlines, the traffic, the boss, the this, that, whatever. Stuff coming at us every day, all day. We have to balance that out. I think it was Zig Ziglar that said we had to balance out I can't remember how that quote went that Zig used to say, but we get so much negative stuff coming at us in our life that we've got to balance that out with the positive. And connecting with our source, reminding ourselves who and what we are as beings of light, of love, of God, every day, keeps that all balanced out for us, keeps our accounts full. And we will be prepared and not shaken by life circumstances. Have you noticed that? Whenever you're prayed up and centered, people cut you off in traffic and you bless them in a nice way. Right? Yeah. Things are easier to take. It's like the old, water off of a duck's back, so to speak. It's just easier when we're filled up with the presence. And number 3, make a withdrawal. Don't hoard your spiritual coin. Make a withdrawal. Share. Share the spiritual coin that you have in your account. Share your faith. Share your love. Share your peace, your harmony, your joy. Share that with the world. That's how we walk through life as a religious scientist. We walk our talk. We share our joy. We share the positivity of our teaching. We share the successes of our life. Make a withdrawal from your spiritual bank account, knowing that it can never be depleted as long as you're doing your spiritual practices and you are being love and walking through the world as love. It can never be depleted. So remembering that we are all partners in this first bank of God, we're all partners in that. We're all on the board of directors with it. We've got our accounts in place. Isn't that fun? Oh, you fixed it. Thanks, Joe. And we have our accounts. We have to maintain them just like we do our financial accounts, right? We have to maintain them. We cannot deplete our spiritual account and not have anything to draw on. We'll be overdrawn. And overdrafts make us unhappy, both financially and spiritually. So I want to leave us today with the way that Ernest Holmes ended this essay in The Living the Science of Mind, where he suggests that we deliberately close all accounts with lesser banks. Deliberately close all accounts with lesser banks. Banks like fear, banks like hatred, banks like animosity. Close those accounts forever, throw away those old checkbooks, and forget about them. And learn to daily turn to the first bank of God for all that you need, want, or desire. So I would invite you to join me as we make a deposit this morning in our first bank of God as we practice our affirmative prayer. Won't you join me? How good it is to recognize this power and this presence that is in, through, and as all of life. This power and presence that is God, source, spirit, essence, presence. It is all that there is. Nothing outside of it. Nothing beyond. Nothing lacking. And all of that is here now, present in, through, and as me and each and every one in this room and everyone within the sound of my voice. For God is all there is, and as such has made its deposit of this infinite love in, through, and as all of its creation. We are infused with that divine power and presence of love, of joy, of peace, of harmony. And from this place of absolute fullness, I know, claim, and accept this day the good of life that is in, through, and as each of us, in, through, and as our lives. And I know that we each have that bank account, that spiritual bank account that is waiting for us, already with its initial deposit, opening deposit as they say, ready for us to draw down on it as necessary, to spend, spare, and share the good of our life with all of those we meet along our journey. And I know too this day that for anyone that has anything on their heart that they would like prayer support around, that we just simply lift that as they bring that forward into their hearts and minds this morning, knowing that the perfect resolution of whatever that might be is brought forward easily and effortlessly with great clarity to and through them this day, as wholeness, as love, as peace. So it is with great gratitude that I release this prayer into the action of universal law, knowing that it is done, it is so, and we affirm and anchor this together by affirming. And so it is.